and we will get going. I'm sure I've interacted with most of you on this meeting before, but for those I haven't met before, I'm Tim Tomyer. I'm with the City of Tucson, and I'm one of the assistant city managers. And I've been involved in this particular conversation around the Reedpark Zoo expansion. It's actually coming up on a year now. It started with some, concerns that were expressed by neighbors over the project as it was envisioned and designed at that time. And it was right about this time last year that we met. I think it was more like October that we met out at the site, and the rest has followed on from there. And I'll also introduce Sierra Boyer is actually Lara Hamway today. Lara is our Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Tucson. She actually joined us in January. So she joined the conversation toward the front end of it and really rapidly came up to speed. By the time we got to the spring, Mayor and Council asked or directed staff to pause the Reedpark Zoo expansion, known as Pathway to Asia, to really engage with the community, to address the concerns that were brought forward at that time. And we had a community conversation dialogue with polls and different options that helped us narrow down. Directed staff to pause the Reedpark Zoo expansion, known as Pathway to Asia. So Lara, did you mute all then? Okay, all right. We had some feedback there. Can you hear me, Lara? Okay, so we're good to go. So we had that direction from council that resulted in some direction after the initial community conversation on May 4th, where they narrowed down the world of possibility for the zoo expansion and set forth some criteria that we then took forward and refined some of the different layout options that, to one degree or another, met the criteria put forth by Mayor and Council. We came back in the summer with kind of three main layouts that either fully met the criteria or met some of the criteria, and had a discussion with many of the stakeholders that have been involved for a long period of time. And after that meeting, at the end of that meeting, we were to come back and really get with the community to really try to hone in on a layout, on a footprint for the zoo expansion by moving boundaries around in whatever way we thought was possible to really get to the best outcome. At the same time, our city manager had directed us to continue looking at the parking lot areas near the zoo, because that was an idea that had come and gone a little bit during the process, but it really met the intent of the stakeholder input and could be meeting the criteria as set forth by Mayor and Council, basically coming down to maximizing the zoo expansion into areas of hardscape, existing hardscape, and minimizing any impacts to open green space. There are other criteria that we'll talk about as well, but that really is where, since the summer, over the last 10 weeks, we worked on a layout that really took us a step further toward honoring that stakeholder input. Because the layouts we had before, of the three, there was one that was entirely in hardscape, but it does not meet animal welfare needs. There were two, one that was almost entirely in existing green space, open green space, but as part of the overall project, a new green space would be created within the Reedpark area, and actually there would have been a net gain in green space, but it was a trade-off of existing green space for future green space. And then there was one that was kind of in the middle. It was about half on hardscape, half on existing green space. And that's where we were going to try to work with those three to come up with something that would work. This during that same period, when we really took a further look at the parking lot areas, we identified a footprint that meets the needs of the zoo expansion and isn't is entirely within existing hardscape. It does have challenges, but those challenges we believe are surmountable. And at the end of the day, it lands the zoo footprint in a good location for the zoo and for animal welfare. It lands it entirely within hardscape. So it does not, it goes beyond the initial initiative, which was to save Barnum Hill and the South Duck Pond. It was to save a particular set of green space. It actually goes further and preserves all existing green space. And one of the other pieces of input was there was desire from some stakeholders to keep the zoo operation on the east side of Lakeshore Lane. Some of the alternatives either took over Lakeshore Lane or crossed over Lakeshore Lane. This layout we'll talk about today is entirely on the east side of Lakeshore Lane. So we didn't want to hold up what might be the solution. So we had to make sure that, first of all, it worked, that it was feasible, that it met all the criteria. And then we went and we did that due diligence to make sure it would work. Then we went to the mayor and council offices and said, okay, we hadn't talked about this one before. It builds on this whole conversation, and we think it really meets your spirit and intent. And we got agreement from each of the council offices and the mayor that, okay, this looks like the win-win we've been looking for. So then as soon as we completed that, we established this meeting. And we sent out a memorandum that talks about the progress to date and the research done to date, but also laid out this footprint so that those that are attending this meeting would have an opportunity to see what we were talking about, without just walking into a meeting and we're like, here, surprise, here's this footprint. I know it takes a while for us to get through those different steps, but it's doing the due diligence on an alternative to make sure it works, so we don't put false hope out, and then also to make sure that it is compliant with the direction from mayor and council, which is critical because that's who has made the decision, and that's who we're trying to make sure we're in lockstep with as we address the community input. So without further ado, I'll ask Lara if she has anything to add, but then I'll also ask her to show the footprint so I can just describe it. And I think we're about almost 40 folks, small enough that I think, if people want to do the hand raising, using the Zoom functions to raise your hand and we can just unmute and speak. We do have the chat function going. If you're more comfortable putting your question or comment in the chat, and then I'll try to monitor the chat and go through that. But this is really a continuation of the dialogue. But I'd like us to center and focus on this particular layout and really talk through it. So Lara, anything to add, or would you like to show the screen?
I'm going to go ahead and jump in and show the screen. I'm certainly available to answer questions as we go through it. Give me 1 second.
And I didn't say it up front, but thank you all for joining us. I know we've been at this for a year now, and I feel like we're getting really close to something that I think honors the input we've received from the community. Again, it needs to be thoroughly vetted and make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences and that we address concerns. So,
Tim, can you just confirm you can see it?
I can see it.
Okay.
On screen.
Okay.
And thank you. And so what we're showing is a air photo of the area, and I'll talk through it, and then I'll just sort of open it up for dialogue. And I didn't label this anything. It's just expansion concept because people will view it different ways. Some might look at it and say, well, that looks like the original G, it's just oriented differently, which it kind of is. It's in that geography. But I really want to just not be tied as much to specific concepts that we've talked about in the past. It's really, do we all agree that this concept meets that input that we've been hearing all along? So Just to orient, I mean, I think you're all very familiar with the area. The North Pond, Barnum Hill, and South Duck Pond area are all on the west side of Lakeshore Lane, which kind of runs north-south through the middle of this image. So those areas are untouched by this layout. And again, so the blue shaded areas are what would be the layout of the zoo expansion. It's in two different areas, which I'll describe why. So the footprint we're proposing to look at is the blue shaded area. To the north of the North Pond is an open grass field where we have the family festival, or well, up until COVID, where we had the family festival. That's an area where we had one of the footprints that met the mayor and council criteria as we interpreted them. But it did occupy significant currently open green space, and that received a lot of negative feedback. When you go to the gray shaded area, just north of the big blue blob, that is the current parks maintenance compound. And there's like these 3 sheds. It's all currently hardscape area. So it's an area that has come into the conversation as a potential area for development to solve this problem of doing this expansion in a way that meets all the different stakeholder interests. So it is existing hardscape. There's a concept called G minor, which was proposed by the community, led by Julia Keene Neighborhood Association, to put the zoo expansion in that area. And then there would be a bridge or some other conveyance structure to connect that zoo area back to the main zoo. The concern over that area is that its close proximity, being immediately adjacent to High Corbett Field, had animal welfare concerns, and we've had expertise look at that. And there's a number of reasons why being right next to that stadium is a non-starter for putting habitat. So while that area can be used, it just cannot be used for zoo habitat. And then we had a kind of a hybrid layout that really straddled Lakeshore Lane and used part of the green space and part of the existing hardscape of the maintenance compound, sort of as Lara is circling there. Again, those are all, I bring them up just for context, and that's where the conversation was in the summer for zoo habitat. Okay. And then we had a kind of a hybrid layout that really straddled Lakeshore Lane and used part of the green space and part of the existing.
Everyone can make sure you're muted. I'm trying to.
As Lara is can you do the circling there? Again, those are all, I bring them up just for context.
Hold on, Tim. All right, try that, Tim.
All right, it's okay. Let's keep rolling. So, because when we need to avoid that feedback issue, Lara has to like just hammer everybody onto the mute, and then we have to figure out a way to get myself off. Okay. So those are where we were by the middle of summer, and we hadn't come to a consensus yet, and we were still getting a lot of feedback about the open green space and kind of the value of the current open green space as opposed to the promise of future green space. That was a real sticking point for many stakeholders. Then there was also this conversation about the value of Lakeshore Lane. And I will take full ownership of my interpretation of feedback we were getting in the spring was that there was interest in reimagining Lakeshore Lane and moving it away from being a north-south single occupancy vehicle corridor. So we had built some of that thinking into some of those concepts from before. When we met with the stakeholders, we got a lot of feedback about that was not a popular direction to go, at least at this point, and at least in this conversation. So we kept working on it, and we looked at the existing zoo parking lot and the parking lot that currently serves the Edith Ball Adaptive Recreation Center. So now you get the thumbs up configuration. Hopefully I had my thumb the right way of as shown. And we do know that there are some concerns about this configuration and how it impacts the access and accessibility of the ARC, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But it would then, the parking lot would be replaced in the area of the Parks Maintenance Compound, or a large area of the Parks Maintenance Compound. And so there are also those that are concerned about, is this less parking than what there's now? Because we know parking at this park is a concern. So there is it's actually a larger area available for parking than what's currently there. And then there's the little area on the southwest part of the zoo, shown in blue, which is currently hardscape. It is a small parking lot, usually used by zoo personnel, and a little side road that leads to that parking lot. And then there's a little area that curls up to the north along the eastern edge of Lakeshore Lane. This area is necessary in order to have the zoo have a completed footprint on the southwest area to accommodate, and not to go too much into the past, but the zoo expansion was going to cross Lakeshore Lane and into and consume Barnum Hill and the South Duck Pond. So that means that the existing zoo was moving west. And so there was some needs to be able to just make a slight adjustment to Lakeshore Lane along a short duration, so that the zoo fence can come out far enough to address the maintenance needs of that part of the zoo, and a couple of projects that are wholly within the zoo and part of the overall master plan. But they weren't constrained because the zoo was going to go west. Now they're constrained because the zoo is not going to go west. We need to do that minor adjustment of Lakeshore Lane to accommodate that. What that will allow us to do is have the entire zoo footprint east of Lakeshore Lane. And when I say a minor adjustment, it's like 5 feet plus or minus shift of the road to have a complete zoo on that end. So with that, there would be parking on the north end that would service both the ARC and the zoo. And it's shown kind of in a light yellow. There's what we're calling a plaza. It's more the entranceway there. We haven't designed this yet, but what we're envisioning is we just invested a lot of money in the front of the zoo. And so the zoo entrance would most likely stay in the same place, and we would have more of like a plaza welcoming people who park at this area, and they would have safe and convenient egress from the parking lot, whether they're going all the way into the zoo entrance or whether their needs are being met at the ARC, and to make that kind of a really cool plaza type welcoming and wayfinding experience. Not yet designed, but that's the thinking behind that. And then the zoo expansion, there's another feature that on the very north end, it actually moves into a building, and that building that's kind of shown there is called the Welding Shop. That is a building that currently exists, and that function of the Welding Shop serves the Parks and Recreation functions. We, until maybe 2 months, maybe a month, maybe 2 months ago, we've thought that building was an immovable object. Unlike the sheds and other things that are easily relocated relatively or reclaimed, that's a hard-walled building with a function, a critical function in it. But we did challenge ourselves on, is there a different way we can perform that welding function for Parks and Recreation to free up that access north-south? So we did. We worked with Parks and Recreation Maintenance Group, and they found a way to be able to allow that building to be removed from the operation and still service the Parks and Recreation Department, which then opened up in many ways this particular configuration and a really good communication between the parking lot and the areas it serves. So that is the layout we're talking about. It uses no open green space. It reclaims parking lots for the zoo green space. So not only does it not take any currently available open green space, it converts existing hardscape into green space within the zoo. At the end of the day, a zoo or a zoo expansion has 50 to 65% green space within it. It addresses the animal welfare because now the habitat areas are now immediately adjacent to the existing zoo. They're further away from High Corbett Field. And actually, those animals in that habitat area is really close to the Animal Health Center. So even when we're transporting animals, if there's a concern or an issue, or even for wellness checks, now it's much more convenient and safer for the animals. And then with the council put a budget goal on us. And so we're looking at how do we do this and stay within that budget goal. We think we can pull it off. Leaves Lakeshore Lane intact as it currently functions. It's no impacts to Reedpark, the form or the function, which was also a concern of folks. And it replaces the parking within existing hardscape. And actually that new parking area has more acreage than the existing parking areas. Again, it's not designed yet, but we have the opportunity to at least match the current parking. And at the end of the day, it's actually a compact, operable zoo. So with that, I know there's been a few comments come in on chat. So I'll start there. Lara, is there anything else you wanted to add to that description before I go to the chat?
No, I think you were very comprehensive.
Okay. All right. So I'll start with Karen had put in, could you please address the parking for the Edith Ball Adaptive Aquatic Center? So we know that the ARC parking lot was designed mindfully to be able to service those customers, to be able to immediately access ARC. And it had a lot of spaces that had different configurations to them to allow, safe ingress and egress from vehicles and into the building. We know that when we put the larger parking lot together, we're going to need to, but also want to reserve space on the very southwestern edge of that, closest to the ARC, to service the ARC. So if a concern is that people will be competing for spots, and if it's like a big zoo day, those coming to the ARC won't be able to get a parking spot or an appropriate parking spot, we're going to make sure that the ARC needs are serviced and that the ARC clientele have the type of parking and the type of proximity that they need to be able to not have to be competing with zoo patrons. So that is a element that we will incorporate into design to make sure that that's happening. And I do appreciate there's a couple of folks that have been bringing up these concerns even as recently as today. And so we're going to work through those in design. Has the city of Tucson contacted and consulted with the Department of Justice as to the agreements and condition of approval when considering the removal of the current parking lot at the ARC? Convenient parking was an important part of making the ARC accessible to all. Would the DOJ support relocation of the ARC parking lot to the north away from the entrance? So we have not contacted the Department of Justice yet. We are doing our due diligence on what our existing agreements are and what the past is. And I will, this is not an apology. This is me saying thank you for bringing that forward, because we had been thinking about this, but I don't have that context. Lara doesn't have that context of when the ARC was developed. So we are making sure that we're doing that full due diligence to make sure that what we provide to the ARC meets those needs and is compliant. Okay. Does the city staff remember the long-term phase 3 of development includes a walking track and an accessible gymnasium built on the land north of the ARC building? How will any future ARC expansion be accomplished? We are working through, and I'll defer to Lara here in a moment. Throughout this conversation, we've had the Adaptive Recreation Center, and we also nearby but not adjacent is the Therapeutic Recreation Center. And we know that we have to enhance those offerings, and we know that we're going to need to make investments in both of those offerings, not just physically, but also in the type of personnel that we retain and hire, and in the type of certifications that we require them to have. So we need to build that function up and or back up. I don't have a specific opinion on the prior phase 3 expansion, but it is within our thinking of how do we provide these services moving forward, and what does it require. So Lara, if you can unmute, I'll bounce to you for a second.
Sure. So we have been very mindful from the very beginning of this concept being introduced, talking about Therapeutic Recreation Center and the ARC, and the planned or the vision for a phase 2 to the ARC. And like Tim said, we don't know exactly how that footprint would proceed, but it will remain part of the conversation. There's also the opportunity when we go through the Reedpark master plan process to also engage the consultants that are involved in that process for them to help us identify where we have opportunity and space. But they are definitely going to be a high priority for us all through this journey. Oh, so I have to
Now I have to ask Lara permission every time I unmute. It's not letting me unmute of my own accord, but that's okay.
Sorry, I don't like Zoom.
That's all right. We're getting there. Does the city recall the parking lot adjacent to the front ender's ARC and the ADA design requirements to accommodate people with mobility limitations, visual impairments, et cetera, and buses transporting senior groups and school children? Yes, that will be core elements of how that new parking lot is designed. There's a comment that starts due to the high degree of volume, but it's cut off. So I'm going to see if it appears later. But yes, front and center of this is making sure that the ARC and its clientele are well served. And so that, yes, those are clearly on our priority agenda. Would the splash pad remain in hardscape around that area with this design? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. For those of you tracking the splash pad, Prop 407 includes a splash pad for Reedpark. When that splash pad was originally placed on a map, it was placed just north of the ARC, which is actually kind of a grassy area right now, but it's a grassy area behind a wall. Some of our other concepts, which we've explored, would have opened up the hardscape to the north of the ARC into new open green space, which would have been an amenity associated with the new splash pad. This concept does not allow for that because it places the emphasis on the current open green space as clearly inputted from the community at our last stakeholder group. So the splash pad would be located in a new area underneath the Reedpark master plan process. Lara, is that correct? She's giving me a head nod.
Yeah,
so
that is 100% correct. And really it's part of the process of how do we be thoughtful in placement. So I think that's actually a win because the community will get to participate in that final selection of location.
Roger that. Nancy said she wanted that southeast part a few years ago back to expand the grizzly habitat, not new. Southeast area. What is the impact of the green area, including horseshoe area? That's where you took the soccer pitch and never gave it back. So that modification to the zoo fence on the southwest area of the zoo does not impact green space, and it does not encroach upon the horseshoe pits. So if you're familiar with the area, there is Citation Wash, which is a small shallow grassy wash that cuts through that portion of Reedpark. And it really separates the horseshoe pit area and some green space and the Cancer Survivors Plaza. So then there's Citation Wash, and across from Citation Wash to the north is the zoo, but between the zoo and that wash is a parking lot and access road. What would be coming into the zoo is that parking lot and access road, no green space, and no impact to the horseshoe pits or the bathroom that's nearby. So that the answer is no impact. During the July 10th meeting, everyone was very enthusiastic about stopping the fireworks during Corbett home games. Will these get stopped for good of the zoo animals, wildlife in the area, and for all our pets? I'm across from the park, and my dog is under the bed when those goes off. So for those of you that weren't there, there was unanimity around the table that people are concerned about the fireworks, and it's a quality of life issue. And I agree at the meeting, and I agree now. So we, city staff, are going to put that into the discussion with our tenants of High Corbett Field, which is the University of Arizona. So we have an existing contract, an existing agreement that allows certain things and disallows other things. That is something we are going to pursue as soon as we're able to get through this conversation, and not that it's dependent on the other, but we've got to have the free space to go do it. And that this is a priority for us to have that conversation. And I am a staff member, so I don't make policy. I am a staff member that agrees with your input that the fireworks are a detraction in that space. So we will work toward getting that addressed. Okay, conveniently located in front of the area center. Okay. Will there be enough paved walkway to provide 6 feet of social distance between someone using a large scooter, families with young children and strollers, and seniors using walkers or canes? The intent of that plaza is to provide plenty of room for people to move through that area from the parking lot to their destination. And so that becomes a design criteria to make sure that plaza functions well. And it's not just a narrow little tunnel that you have to try to squeeze your way through. That's not an outcome anybody wants. Everybody wants both of those facilities to be successful and for people to have a great experience when they get there. And putting up a constraint that prevents that is not our goal. I don't think that's anybody's goal. So the goal would be to have it be a welcoming, maybe even kind of a cool and interesting plaza, welcoming people into both the zoo and the ARC. What is the drainage plan for the walkway to manage rainwater flooding from the north parking lot to reach both the ARC and the zoo entrance? So I will upfront say we've not done any design yet to know exactly how we'll manage stormwater. What I will say though is, you're right. We need to manage floodwaters to not only convey floodwater and manage it, but not make it so that it's a barrier to people trying to utilize the facility. So we don't want to dump all the flood water into the plaza and have people not able to get to the zoo or the ARC. We also know that existing hardscape has a certain drainage pattern, and there's kind of like this little minor wash that kind of goes to the west, kind of across Lakeshore Lane. When we design that parking lot, we have to take all of that into consideration. And the thing that I'll plus up with is that we in the city have a new and evolving perspective on hardscape, parking areas, and stormwater management. It takes us a while to get all of those things from the old pattern of curb and gutter and pave everything and stripe it to parking areas that not only don't exacerbate stormwater runoff issues, but also can become welcoming places in themselves. And one of our vehicles for doing that is our Green Stormwater Infrastructure Fund, which we've actually built up a bit of a nest egg there. And one of the primary uses of that fund is to leverage existing upcoming projects so that you create parking areas that manage stormwater mindfully, not just as a nuisance to get rid of the stormwater, but to retain it, to use it to grow tree net canopy, to create actually welcoming areas. So I know I went on about that a little bit, but It's not designed yet, but those design criteria are critical and important. And we actually have resources now to put toward having those outcomes, better outcomes. Okay. How will school, I'm curious about how school bus ingress, egress, and drop off is handled in this configuration. Kind of two main options. One is make sure that when we build out that parking area, not only do we provide the ADA accessible parking spaces, close proximity, but that we create a safe environment for buses, whether those are, you know, school buses for field trips or folks coming to the ARC. We need it because what we have right now is really cool and really functions well. We have that big turning area and embarkation, debarkation area between the two parking lots. We need to do something to make sure that that works well. One of the advantages to the new parking lot is it opens up opportunities on both Lakeshore Lane and Randolph Way for that type of ingress drop off, but also how we can really accommodate the larger vehicles that are bringing the school children, that are bringing the tours. Where we are right now, you have to have that big wide turning area because you have to dead end into the parking lots and find your way back out. We may still do something like that. It may still be some kind of big radial turnaround. We've done that at this place. That's what we have at the Sweetwater Wetlands. If you've ever visited those, that's what we have at the Southeast Houghton Area Recharge Project, Sharp, if you've ever visited that. But we also have a big area to work with that allows us to do some creative things. Definitely a design criteria. Okay, I'm gonna go with Bonnie's comment. Bonnie's my new favorite. So Bonnie says, I appreciate all the hard work and willingness to rethink over and over. Thank you for an excellent solution. Thank you, Bonnie. Let's get you some, free tickets to the ARC pool or whatever you'd like to use. I'm just kidding. I don't bribe people much. I'm kidding. No, thank you, Bonnie, because we've been doing this for a while. And I'll also take a step back and be a little bit vulnerable to say, I know that there's a trust issue with many members of the community and the city structure itself. And maybe even that trust issue extends to me personally, and that's fine. I can deal with that. I can tell you, I earnestly want the best outcome here. And I've been working very hard to help navigate us through this conversation to get to this better outcome, which I firmly believe we've come an amazing way from what was originally going to be done to this concept. So that means a lot to me when you say something like that, because I know our work's not done, but I think we've landed in a place that can work really well. So thank you, Mike. All right. From Manon, it is hard to see where Lakeshore Lane is being changed in this map. Will that disturb the restroom or any trees on the west side? You're right. It's hard to see from this scale. What we're doing is finding the narrowest movement possible to accommodate what we need to do on the east side of the fence. I don't think there's any likelihood that it affects the restroom. There's 3 trees kind of in that general area. And we've just did an assessment of those 3 trees. And actually, and by saying there's 3 trees in that area, that does not mean we need to impact those 3 trees. I'm just saying we did an assessment of the 3 closest trees. And actually they're, one of them's in good health. Another one's in moderate health and one's in poor health. But we don't necessarily have the footprint defined enough to know whether it will impact any of those trees. I'm doubtful that it'll impact 2 of those trees. There's one tree that's the Aleppo pine. If you think of it, it's by the bathroom. It's an Aleppo pine that is leaning over Lakeshore Lane. It's in poor health, and we probably can avoid that tree, but that tree might be in danger just from its current condition. So, and reason I took a little bit of time with that is because I want to make sure I'm clear, but I also want to make sure that folks who are tuning in understand we take that very seriously. There's been a tremendous amount of value from the community placed on not just trees, but these trees. And so we're really trying to make sure we have minimal, if any, impact. There is that one pine that we're going to have to look at to make sure But that would be the extent of it, if anything. All right, so a question, should the Reedpark master plan not precede the zoo expansion plan? In this case, it will not. So we have direction from mayor and council on proceeding with the zoo expansion and proceeding with the zoo, or I'm sorry, with the Reedpark master plan. Now, I'll ask Lara to give an update on the master plan here in a second. This particular layout is very compatible with that master plan effort continuing forward with the zoo layout as a known fixture within it. So I know we've heard that from a number of folks, or a few folks, I'm going to say a few folks, that we should do the master plan first and then this. What I'd like you to consider is we've already done a lot of master planning, including a master plan for the zoo. And that master plan was leading us in a direction that the community was objecting to. We know what the input is regarding this zoo expansion, and we feel very strongly that we have a layout that works for that and accommodates that and gets us all to that goal of a zoo expansion proceeding with no negative impacts to Reedpark. What that does leave, though, is a lot of opportunity for that Reedpark master plan to focus on the areas where we can really make the additional investments under 407 and other mechanisms to really expand the impact of Reedpark. So another long-winded answer of no. And we have direction from council that we're following in order to affect that outcome. Lara, do you mind jumping in a little bit on the status of the Reedpark master plan?
Sure. So we put out an RFP, I believe it was back in early August. We had the initial review process of the applicants or the proposers. And in October, I want to say it's October 12th, we were actually getting the, not in person because we're doing it virtual, but the actual presentations from the top 3 candidates to help us make a better selection of the ultimate vendor that will be working with us on this. We anticipate, just because once we get a contract or agreement in place, allow the firm to gather data and get the information that they require, that we're probably, and also knowing that we're right on top of the holiday season, we want to make sure that when we do launch our community engagement as part of that entire process, that we do so without any sort of detriment for public to participate. So we're thinking somewhere in the January timeframe that we would launch that. But it is definitely very much on its way, and I would say close to completion post the presentations that are pending.
Thanks, Lara. And I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit with an update on another project, which may or may not be of interest to you, but if your interest is in climate resiliency and sustainability, as many of you know, the mayor and council declared a climate emergency a little over a year ago and called for a climate action and adaptation plan to be prepared for the city of Tucson. We just had consultant interviews on that piece, and we're expecting within 30 to 60 days to be able to start that work. So just a little plug that I know we're talking Reedpark here, but if you have a passion for that type of work and being involved in that, that's also forthcoming. And all of these efforts indicate that mayor and council's intent and direction toward sustainability. So that's coming up. So Michelle Crow had a couple of comments. She summed it up with saying she's trying to figure out how this footprint relates to the playground space and services in the Therapeutic Rec Center. Lara, not to test your technology, are you able to bring up that map one more time? If not, I'll just describe it. But the map will help. All right. Can you zoom in a little bit to the Therapeutic Rec area? If not, I mean, I can talk through it. But... Okay, so
I'm not sure how, because it's a web page.
No problem.
Sorry.
So if you can circle so that's the Therapeutic Rec building, not to be confused with the Adaptive Recreation Center. 2 different services provided. The building itself is untouched. The back yard of the building is where the service road servicing inside the zoo could go through. Lara, can you describe what's in that area that's sort of overlapped with blue and what it means from your perspective on the services we provide?
So this is for the therapeutic recreation folks. This is a dedicated outdoor space. It's fenced, it's secure. It has a playground area and it's got some picnic tables. And so from the very beginning, like what I was saying before, we've been having clear conversation with the zoo that ultimately, whatever the final footprint is, if we were to impact this green space or outdoor space, ultimately we would need to figure out a way to look at the area and how do we restore that space for therapeutic recreation. We understand the value to it, especially considering that they, in the summer months, they're servicing kiddos that are starting around age 3 and up, and to have that outdoor area that they can play in a safe environment is a priority. So, I mean, and I'm a huge advocate for the special needs population, and so I'm not going to let that just fall to the wayside. And the zoo has also very much committed to working with us on it. And I do want to say, or just highlight that Tim did use the word could. And really, at the end of the day, what you're viewing here is conceptual. It's not with us doing, having an actual design firm that's on board to tell us what's actually feasible after they do all of their own measurements. So at this point in time, this is a possibility, but it's not confirmed yet.
Thanks, Lara. But to reiterate, if we need to utilize some of that space to make this overall solution work, we will provide those amenities right there, just in a different spot. There, and she's pointing to, there's kind of this little jut out of the parking area there, small parking, not taking away a lot of spaces, but actually could be a very immediately proximal redevelopment opportunity to replace anything that is impacted from therapeutic rec. And then I'll also say, Lara she's doing a lot of wonderful things. And one of the things she's doing in leading this department is strategically thinking about the future and the services we should be providing and how we're providing. And while we don't yet know exactly what that holds for therapeutic rec, I can assure you that it includes some better facilities and some better programming and ability to deliver those services. I've been with Lara long enough to know that that is something that will be a priority for her, which then becomes a priority for me because we have to work together to make these things happen. So, okay. Thanks, Michelle. Just saw your response. I'm going back into the chat. And I just want to make sure I just scroll back up a little bit here. Let's see. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Okay, there's quite a few. I just want to make sure I pick up. Okay, all right. If anyone wants to look at the posted memo and proposed concept, Lara/Sierra has posted that. All the stuff's up there on the web. Would like to know the distance from the new proposed parking lot and what is the distance now that it is immediately adjacent to the, I'm going to assume, ARC. So, right, current parking is immediately adjacent. I don't have the exact distance, but it would be, I hate throwing out a number without measuring it, but it's probably 200 feet plus or minus. And that's something we can look at in design to make sure it's minimized. The building on the far east side of the current zoo parking lot. Yep, that's therapeutic rec. We covered that. Oh, and ARC entrance. So I think we covered those two. And then Lara added to Michelle's comment that we're working with Beth. Beth Lucas oversees our therapeutic recreation operations. to make sure that they have what they need to deliver that service, maybe even better than what they have now. I'm glad that a solution has been found to save Barnum Hill and expand the zoo. It's too bad that Therapeutic Rec and Adaptive Rec are the most impacted in all of this. Those patrons who use the ARC have difficulty just getting in and out of their cars, and now they have further to go to access the pool. I know it was said that there will be parking for the ARC patrons who will enforce the parking to ensure those spaces are available and who have a variety of disabilities. So I agree that it's all about trade-offs, right? We actually have multiple layouts that preserved Barnum Hill and the South Duck Pond and provided a zoo expansion. We landed on this one because there were a continuing dialogue about the value of current open space. Now, Therapeutic Rec will either be entirely not affected or its impacts will be mitigated in the immediate vicinity with installation of a playground and outdoor space that functions equivalently or if not better than the current one. So I wouldn't characterize as Therapeutic Rec as being impacted. ARC, yes, I can absolutely see the point that moving the parking area, even if it's a couple hundred feet, is an impact. What I'm going to note is there's a few things we'll look at in design. These are just concepts right now. But the ARC has its main entrance on the east side for a variety of reasons. It has its deliveries on the west side for a variety of reasons. It also, its north edge is not a public entrance currently. Its north edge is kind of just a grass lawn and a wall. And that's where the splash pad was going to go. So we were already going to be providing some form of connectivity north from the ARC to the splash pad and back and forth. I can envision an alternative or a portion of the solution being ways to move, if the ARC parking is immediately north of the ARC, that there could be some patrons who come in through the plaza and there could be some other entrance access egress developed to meet any needs or impacts from that. Again, that's a concept, but I'm an engineer enough to be able to see that as a potential outcome, and I'll certainly be inserting that into the thinking. So the ARC might have multiple ways to get to it now, as opposed to the one. Okay. Who will enforce the parking? That's going to be a partnership between the city and the zoo, which is a function of the city, to make sure that ARC patrons are not negatively impacted by these changes and don't have to compete for parking. Generally, time of COVID, we actually know anybody that is coming because people are reserving ahead and things of that nature. Even during non-COVID times, we generally know who we're serving with the ARC, and we will be very tuned into whether or not they're having difficulties getting in and out of the facility. So I'm confident we'll be able to manage through that. Okay. Any plans to do an environmental impact study? Tucson Water was cautioned about waste of water as we adjust the continuing mega drought and the issues of water availability and our groundwater protection. Not seeing the architect's rendering, it sounds as though there are plans to build a swimming pools for a couple of tigers seems very wasteful. Building adjacent to open green space could be a significant issue. Environmental impact study seems necessary and appropriate for the best outcome. We are doing the due diligence we need to in order to do the project. An environmental impact study environmental impact study is a term of art that requires certain things and is triggered by certain actions. There will not be an EIS for this project, but there will be all of the clearances and assessments necessary to make sure it's done right, it's done to code, and it's done appropriately. With regard to the water within the zoo, AKA, and then also by extension, the water within the zoo expansion area, there's a few things to touch on there. One is much of those needs are already met by reclaimed or recycled water. And there's also the opportunity to recirculate water within a habitat area. There's a lot of that was already and maybe I'll turn it to Nancy for this answer, because we're pivoting from where we designed it before and how it was going to function to something that's not designed yet. But that water stewardship piece was built into the design thinking on the expansion to begin with. Nancy, are you able to weigh in?
Yeah, just water conservation is important to the zoo as well. We've looked at using minimal water and moving away from dump and fill pools, as Tim mentioned, to ones that recirculate water, using reclaimed water wherever possible. And we'll continue those practices. Throughout this process, we will be asking our architects and engineers to aid us in identifying ways that we can be most efficient and conservation friendly with our water usage.
I muted myself, then couldn't unmute myself. So thank you, Nancy. What I'll add to that, if you know me, you know I'm a recovering water director for Tucson Water. And so I absolutely deeply understand water stewardship and doing everything in my power to help Tucson do that even better. I mentioned the green stormwater infrastructure, but I guess I didn't emphasize as that pertains to the parking lot itself, not only becomes a way to manage stormwater and create a more welcoming and comforting environment of a parking lot, it also becomes a way to steward that rain and storm water to be the supply source for those trees and vegetation that create the better environment. We can also enhance aquifer recharge. So through our GSI program, Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program, we touch a lot of sustainability criteria, including water stewardship. And then within the zoo footprint itself, very water efficient approach to that, including recycling coming in, recycled water coming into the site and recycling on site. So Meredith, thank you. She said, yes, solid vote of appreciation for your efforts, Tim and Lara. Not an easy space. It isn't easy, but nothing worthwhile is easy. And I appreciate that, that comment. And I know, Meredith, you're one that's been with us for virtually this whole conversation. And as challenging as it is, you know, you can sleep. I know I can sleep well at night knowing that we're really getting close to something great here, and being vulnerable and open to the input. From a known, that particular tree is in poor health because they drive over the roots of the carts and didn't take plugs out of the earth so it can get water without it running off into the road. Gabriel, if you know, some of you are seeing the chat yourself, the arborist. So for those of you that don't know, Gabriel was one of the, is an arborist by trade and was one of our core stakeholders throughout. Yes, so we know that there's practices we do on a daily basis, even in how we maintain our grounds, that can have negative impacts on our trees and vegetation. Again, this is another area that Lara is focused on. And applying those lessons to all of our tree inventory is important. And not just defaulting to, we can't save that tree. You know, we will do efforts we can to try to help the tree help itself. So we've heard that, and I know that Lara's having those conversations with our team. What I'll add to it is we also have an urban forestry program manager. The city hired Nicole. I think she started in December or November. She works for me, so you'd think I would know that. Actually, she might even be on here. I don't want to call her out if she's here. Nicole, our urban forestry program manager, is working on a couple of things. One is some tree standards. So standards of care for the city for all of our trees. We have something like 40,000 trees that are City of Tucson trees on City of Tucson properties. So, and believe it or not, we've just maintained them as, you know, just something that we would just, oh, there's a problem, cut that limb down. Oh, it's leaning, cut that tree down. We took all their chainsaws away, and now we're only giving them back when they show their proficiency in it. So we're the Titanic, hopefully not sinking. Okay, we're an aircraft carrier. We didn't sink. And it takes a while to turn that aircraft carrier, but we've got the people really efforting that. We also have an RFP that Nicole's working on that will be coming out soon to do a tree inventory, which, okay, you're all thinking, you're gonna have somebody go out there and count your trees. What a waste of taxpayer dollars. And I'm gonna say, no, that's not what a tree inventory is. Tree inventory is to know our trees, but also their condition, their needs. Are they in the right place, the right setting, the right tree? And that's an investment we're going to be making because it's important. And because we are moving from trees just being some minor part of what everybody sort of pays attention to and only looks at when they're a problem, to being infrastructure that we manage as a valued asset of the community. So we're not there yet. That's where we're going. So these are things happening. Okay, sorry. So I don't disagree, and we are working it. Okay. So Bob Vint, hi Bob. For comparison's sake, considering how vehicle access, parking, and pedestrian circulation is handled at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, it's quite extensive and spread out, and it works fine. Correct. And it's been a while since I've been there. I'm not even sure if it's all paved. I might be conflating that with the biosphere. Anyway, if it's all paved, but yes, it is spread out and it's extensive. We also are in a space constrained space versus a relatively unconstrained space. But there are lessons to be learned from the Desert Museum. There's lessons to be learned from a lot of different aspects around town that can be applied here. And then when you do spread that out and you create that environment for tree wells and vegetation, you break up that hardscape to not just be this monolithic, heat sink. It becomes a welcoming environment. So thank you, Bob. I appreciate that comment. Can you share how you envision the flow of traffic going into the new parking lot area? And do you anticipate any additional traffic controls to manage traffic going to the new parking lot? I don't have a great answer other than we have identified where we believe we can do safe ingress, egress off Randolph Way, but it's going to be a little bit further to the north, and an area where safe ingress, egress can occur off Lakeshore Lane, which, you're very familiar with it, Jocelyn. You know that we have some parking areas that run along Lakeshore Lane. They're on the east, both sides of Lakeshore Lane, northwest of the Edith Ball Adaptive Rec. That will be constraints because we want to make sure people can find it, but also find their way safely in and out of it, whether you're a school bus, whether you're a delivery truck, whether you're just folks on your bicycles coming to the amenities. So I don't have a traffic pattern. I don't yet know if there's any new traffic signaling or traffic control that will be needed. Those are clearly design criteria we need to make sure we handle well. Let's see. This is at Sierra, but it says Sierra, it's Lara. Sierra Boyer is the community engagement and marketing person for Parks and Rec. She's been involved in this throughout. She just happens to be off today. When we were proposing G, we were reaching out to other partners and investigating options to get better facilities for TRC, Therapeutic Rec, folks that need the services provided by the rec center, similar to what they're requesting in there. Hold on, I have to scroll. In their bond request that was not allowed to be on the final ballot proposal for bond. We feel that there are still options out there to better meet their needs, and we'll hope to be able to continue that conversation as well. Yes, absolutely. And I will say that was not a very active conversation, at least within the department or within the city, until unveiled, at least in our eyes, through this community conversation. So we don't want to lose any momentum when we've identified things that are underserved, need help, need investment, and that is one of them. So it says Therapeutic Rec loses its playground. I'm going to back up to what both Lara and I say. It might, or it might not. If it does, a new playground will be placed right there at Therapeutic Rec and to service that. Let's see. Okay. Hi, Tracy. I think I sent you an email earlier today. Thanks for your commentary you provided. If you're the right Tracy, I believe you are. Reedpark and ARC maintenance facilities to the north are reduced, and with the parking. How does the city plan to properly maintain the land, pools, roads, ponds, trees with this land use change? So I'll pause there. I'm going to turn it to Lara in a second, and I'm going to say that's been in the thinking all along. And I can say honestly that when we first started looking at potential zoo expansions, it wasn't city staff that came up with, let's do something in that parking area, or I'm sorry, in the parks maintenance compound. Cause we're like, that's our parks maintenance compound. We need our parks maintenance compound. It came in from some commentary from the folks associated with Save the Heart of Reedpark very early. They're like, what about that? What can we do there? It also came in the form of a concept known as G minor. And so through those conversations, we, the city staff, have paused and reflected and said, how do we contribute to solving this problem? And what can we do in that area to make this work? So there's a few things, and I don't want to steal all of Lara's thunder, but there's absolutely some efficiency that can be gained within that footprint without even impacting operations at all. Because when you have space, you kind of tend to fill it up. And so they've had these 3 big sheds, and we're storing an old dinosaur out there. And then there's and much of it is very useful, but some of it is like, we could do without that. What we're doing is looking at not only how do we reconfigure that, but what do we most need to preserve, which is why we traded off. We opened up the welding shop as a potential spot, and we preserved a kind of an equipment shed. And then a little bit further to the east is what we call the Sam warehouse. And there's a fueling station, which we didn't want to impact. And within that Sam warehouse, there's a ton of room. So Lara, if I left you any space.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So exactly what Tim was saying, the Sam warehouse, which is over here, I'm kind of circling it right now. We're going to be looking at how do we get all of our inventory that is stored within these buildings here into here. Recreation has some areas that they've identified. There may be some opportunity to move stuff from being in a centralized location, but actually putting out to our rec locations. Part of the discussion with the zoo was trying to maintain some access points here because we have our Ready Set Rec that does launch from here, and that needs to stay because that makes sense, but we've looked at possibly parking those vans in this area. Had lots of conversation, but to your concerns about maintenance, this is what the folks here call the barn. It's where they maintain the vehicles or the equipment that maintains the park at large. They, through that conversation that Tim talked about, they felt that the welding building was less valuable than the barn. And so that's how we came to the decision to give up the welding building and preserve the barn. And then you see this area in green here. It's for future conversation on how do we preserve some access points, how do we consider the flow. And there's another area that's near the quad that is currently not utilized. It's not green space that they also identified being able to do some staging from. It's not on this map. But we are in constant conversations on how to be more efficient. And we have a firm that is going to be coming in and helping us by doing a total space assessment of how many vehicles are here, what equipment is here, what is in the storage units currently, and what capacity we have left, and how, and then that allows me to let Tim know if I do need to, say, make one of my compounds in another park slightly bigger, or what's the pathway. Right now I don't know that information, but it's definitely something that we are already working towards so that we are not a delay in this project moving forward.
Thanks, Lara. And what I'll add to that is, it's not Parks and Recreation Department's problem to solve. It's a city-wide approach to it. So the conversation about the welding shop, that was not an easy decision to make, but we found a way where our Environmental and General Services Department can provide that welding service to the Parks and Recreation Department. And I get it. I was a director of a department, and I want to control everything I can, and I want my welder to do that and my electrician to do that. But for citywide efficiency, we can provide these services to one another, and then that becomes an internal trust and performance conversation. So the way we got to the decision is Lara's welder became vacant, and I told her she couldn't fill it. So anyway, but it and she's not happy with me still, but that's okay, because what it does is it created an opportunity. All right, I'm showing dirty laundry here on the call. It's fine. Will green usable park space be lost for new maintenance activities? No. Okay, thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Liddy. And okay, let's see. We have one that got truncated here. It says Tim and Lara, but it's going to pop down here below. Okay, Michelle, we have a full watch party going on here at my house because we are so excited. And one of the, well, good. I hope we're not disappointing. One of the questions being asked is how the community can be involved in master planning process from the beginning. What will that look like? As Lara indicated, I'm going to turn it back to her in a second. Consultant selection is imminent. Within next month, we'll know who, and then we negotiate with them. And then in January, that'll flow forward. Lara, more to say on that.
Yeah, so we actually made it a very pivotal part of the request for qualifications, and we hope to get a very clear idea as part of the presentations to come, how the company that eventually gets selected is planning on doing a very comprehensive, both park-based, citywide-based, recognizing the importance of this park, what it means to immediate community, as well as to the city at large. We also, through the entire process, I can tell you from almost day one in January when I started, Sierra, who Tim mentioned is our marketing person, already had a running list of folks that had been contacting us in regards to the zoo expansion project. We continued every single point of contact that we got through that. We have captured all of that information as we went through the conversation process, that those contacts as well. So in addition to whatever the vendor that is assigned the project, the resources that they have, we will also make sure that they know that all those people that have opted in and wanted to stay involved in this conversation are brought in automatically to the master plan conversation.
Thanks, Lara. So I'm happy with these questions related to that, because we hope we've built some momentum. I know we've been in a tangled discussion on a specific element. Born out of that is hopefully an increased connection and understanding and energy to pour into that master plan process. So I like this. And okay, at your convenience, Michelle, your watch party folks. I didn't know we had a watch party, but that's kind of cool. When people used to watch Bob Newhart, you'd take a drink every time somebody said hi, Bob. There's a million examples. What's the thing that I do that every time I do it, y'all take a drink so I know? And then anyway, that's a little sidebar there. Thank you. You have done an incredible job finding solutions to all over a very contentious project. Thank you. Thank you for that comment, and for sticking with us. We're learning from this. Yet another that is interested in hearing more specifics about the Reedpark master plan. We touched on that, and when those emails come in from us, that we're really seeking your involvement. Is this it? Is it written into the program? No further expansion permitted. I cannot say what the future holds after this. There's a overall, and I don't want to get tangled up into master plans versus master plans, but this expansion is part of a master plan that was developed for Reedpark Zoo, which includes other elements, some of which we've already done, the entrance, the flamingo habitat, some of which are going to be ongoing right now or very soon, which is on the, toward to finishing off that southwest area. And we also did like the Andean bear exhibit. And then we have this expansion. The one of the elements of pivoting from that previous design to a new solution is we have to update the Reedpark Zoo master plan. This is, and we don't want to ever get those disconnected again, because at some point in some minds, the Reedpark master plan and the Reedpark Zoo master plan became different, and they're the same thing. If you're master planning one, you're master planning the other. So rounding back to an answer to your question is, I can't speak to what lies beyond this. I do not have that vision. What I have is we need our conversation will be ongoing as we develop this project and as we do the Reedpark master plan, what the future holds for all elements. From Unknown, thank you for listening and for your comments, Tim. So glad to hear chainsaws have been checked out now. Thanks, Manon. I appreciate that. It literally, go take their chainsaws away. That was, I might have sent that email. Another question from the house party. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Wondering if Tucson needs a change to code that when a park is losing green space, that it automatically must be reviewed by the Parks Commission and Historical Commission with extensive public participation. So lessons learned that we don't forget. How do we do that? And as much as I can say, as long as I'm here, this will never happen again. That has to be, which is 9 more years. That has to be a cultural understanding that lives with the organization and the community, not with the individuals. So I haven't cracked that code to know how to inculcate that to make sure this doesn't happen again, other than making sure that as new staff come in, new leaders emerge, that these stories are shared, and that we make sure they understand the history. Having said that, whether or not, and this is from Molly McCassin, whether or not a code change is required, I don't have an answer for that, but that is a question I can pose. And whether it's a code change, whether it's a procedural documentation, there's many ways that work gets done in a city. There's many ways that rules are set in place. It could even be an administrative directive is another way to create certainty, or at least increase certainty that certain mistakes are not repeated. So I can't say yes, code change. What I can say is, yeah, Lara and I are nodding our heads together. We'll come up with a way to make sure that this doesn't happen again to the extent we can prevent. Hi, Michelle. Really appreciate you all. So I'll always read Michelle's comments. Particularly appreciate you making best use of the storage work area. And secondly, working hard to establish the precedent in these kind of decisions. There should be no net loss of green space when we add amenities to a park. That's new practice for COT. And I think it's important work under this kind of framework. And I do agree with you. And some self-reflection. Those of you that know, I'm not a parks professional. I come from other technical background, but I did get to sit in Lara's seat for 6 months on an interim basis. What I heard and what I continue to hear and I'm attuned to is value sets evolve over time, both within an organization and within a community. And what I heard dating back to a year ago is there might have been a viewpoint that space needs to be programmed. It needs to have some kind of imprint on it that makes it usable. For example, if you're thinking about a park and you think about the space within that park, you're like, I need a baseball field there. I need tennis courts there. I need a bathroom there. And what we heard, and I think it's a lasting impression, not just a passing, is that the value of the space itself, the open space, the vegetation, that experience within the urban environment is as, if not more valuable than a programmed thing. So that was just, thanks for giving me the chance to kind of riff on that. And I agree. Jose, Want to thank all our community that has been closely involved and engaged. I appreciate the new concept. I still have a huge concern that we're making alterations to our regional park without a master plan. What are the plans for the master plan, especially as these changes happen to the park with this new zoo design? Is there an opportunity to maybe incorporate some of this new master plan with the new zoo design? So I will say we have a project well-defined that's going to proceed, and it becomes an element of that master plan. Since these are happening concurrently, there will absolutely be feedback to and from the master plan and how this zoo expansion is ultimately designed. We've got to deal with the ingress, egress, safe, and taking it a step further, multimodal access through and across Reedpark and to other amenities in the area. So I can't definitively say is that there will absolutely be some symbiosis between the two, but they just won't be sequential. All right, Michelle, LOL. Yes, we have libations. Okay. And every time I use my hands is the cue to talk. And she's representing a lot of folks in their questions, not just Michelle. And that's cool. I appreciate it. Actually, keeps it moving. Okay. Tracy, it feels premature to move forward until we hear from the Department of Justice regarding the questions delivered to the city today regarding the replacement of the ARC parking lot. When do you plan to make contact with the DOJ? So again, and as she indicated, this is input we got just today. And just when I think I know what I need to know, somebody brings up really valid questions or concerns. We've already started. I can't say we've reached out to Department of Justice yet. I can say that we've already been really diving into this, both city staff, but we've also put it onto Nancy's radar that we have to work this together to make sure we do this well. I would say as early as next week, we'd be prepared to reach out and just find out where we stand. Is it going to be next week or the week after? It'll be at the time when we have all the information pulled together and we know the right questions to ask. And we'll also make sure that we engage our city attorney's office to make sure that we don't have a staff level conversation and then we miss some of the key elements of that. That takes at least a few days, if not a couple of weeks to pull together. So we have the right conversation with that. So it's going to be very soon. We already have today been talking about that. Actually, even as early as yesterday, because we had received this input a couple of different ways. With that, I think I've reached the end of the chat. With that, it's 4:25, which is pretty good. With that, I just made everybody at Michelle's house drink again. So I think we're feeling pretty good. I'd like to say that the conversation's not over. I feel really, this is a lot of critical input, a lot of positive. I feel very positive about today's meeting. And I feel positive about where we are and where we're going. And I know we're going to continue the conversation. What I'd like to say is we are going to be taking this to the next level. Define that however you want. But what that means is we have to put onto paper better definition of what this means, what this looks like, how it functions, how it works. That means we would engage the designer to do some work for us. What I'm going to be asking that designer to do is also incorporate in their early work some visuals, some renderings, so that we early on have a feel for how this works, looks, feels, functions. Coupled with that, many of you are comfortable to reach out to myself or Lara directly. Continue to do that if you like. We are going to reopen or reactivate an email inbox that we used previously for the community conversation, but it's really just a convenient place for people to pour their input in, because I don't want anybody to feel like, well, that's it till January or whatever. I want you to know that if you have a burning question, a burning comment, or just something you want us to make sure we're thinking of, that you can provide that. And I'll also say that over this next time period, Lara and I, and I'll speak for Nancy, hopefully she's willing, I'm sure she is, we're happy to meet with you or small groups to talk through your input directly. I don't envision us having to convene the large group until we're at the next point of here's something to look at. But the window for communication remains open. And so feel free to either reach out directly or Lara, what's the email address?
So what I was gonna say is I did reach out and they have to reactivate the email address. So by Monday, we'll have it live. So what I'm gonna do is ask Sierra to send out a message to the group that says, we've reinvigorated the email and it is now available to use for comments, both related to the zoo and then down the road within a few months, the master plan. So we're going to keep using a tool set that we had success with in the last 9 months.
Okay. So you'll get a note from us by Monday saying, you know, please share your thoughts here. And if you're confident and happy with where we're going, great. You can also say that. If you're like, hey, you better make sure that the clients of ARC have the right parking in the right location, keep saying that. We get it, but we're human too, and we want to make sure we don't lose any of that along the way. Nancy or Sue, I've been hogging the mic here. Anything you want to say as we wrap up the meeting? Or are you just giving me a cold stare? No, you're waiting for Lara to let you. It's all right.
They should be good to go.
Okay, now I
Okay,
can.
there's Nancy. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you covered it well. I appreciate all of the input that has come in from the community and look forward as we refine this and work together with everyone to continue to have a solution that works for everyone and hopefully is exciting and especially with the Reedpark master plan as well. So.
Lara was on it. She knew she had to allow me out. So thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Lara, aka Sierra. And thanks for your comments toward the end here. I'm going to go ahead and read this. Huge thanks to Tim, Lara, COT staff, community leaders, and like Bob Vent and other concerned citizens for pointing out alternatives to the past plan and contributing to this beautiful solution for the zoo expansion. My trust in the city is being restored, and I feel that Reedpark planning will benefit in the long term. I can't think of a better way to end this call than with that comment there. My humble gratitude for taking a year to help us figure this out. And we're not done yet. We're not done communicating yet. But you have my gratitude, appreciation. And it's Friday, it's 4:30. It's, I think, happy hour for the rest of us who are not at the watch party and already pretty deep into the weekend. So with that, we'll probably pull the recording and we'll conclude the call. Thank you all.